The speaker is off to your right and I'm off to your left. How's everyone's morning going so far? You guys all been enjoying the aquarium? Yeah, awesome, good to hear. Well guys, my name is Cameron. First of all, thank you all so much for coming along and welcome to the Cairns Aquarium. Now at the moment you guys are currently continuing your journey throughout the aquarium, which is all the way here into our beautiful Great Barrier Reef. So when you started off in the aquarium, you were all the way out west into our flooded riverways of North Queensland. You have then followed that river downstream through our wet tropics rainforest. You've just passed our mangroves. You're here to our Great Barrier Reef, and your next stop will be the depths of the Coral Sea. So you guys are currently sitting in front of a beautiful recreation of what we like to call a ribbon reef. So the ribbon reefs are a stunning chain of about 10 individual reefs that you can find a little bit further northeast from Port Douglas. And the ribbon reefs are to be considered one of the most pristine reef ecosystems along the entire Great Barrier Reef itself. This area is also known as the drop-off zone. So exactly like that in Finding Nemo when he swims out to touch the boat, the exact same area with that drop-off down into the depths of the Coral Sea. Now what is the Great Barrier Reef? Well, the Great Barrier Reef is massive. It stretches all the way from the top of Australia right to the tip of Cape York, right down here to the bottom of Queensland in a place called Bundaberg. The Great Barrier Reef is roughly 2,300 kilometres long and in some parts up to 350 kilometres wide. And it is literally so big that you can see it clearly from outer space. Now the Great Barrier Reef can be considered one single reef ecosystem. However, technically it's actually comprised up of about 2,900 individual reefs and up to 900 sand cays and islands. Now the Great Barrier Reef that we see today is about 8,000 years worth of continuous growth. And the main builders of the reef that we see today is our corals. Now there's two main types of coral out of the reef. We have got our hard corals and our soft corals. So soft corals are the really strikingly vibrant, sort of wavy looking corals. However, they've got a very soft structure to them, so it's not a good solid foundation for the reef to be able to build up on. So that is when you then get your hard corals. So hard corals like the ones that we've got in this tank here, the sort of plate corals and the staghorn corals and the mushroom corals that have got that real hard, solid foundation that the reef has actually built up on over the past 8,000 years. Now what is coral? Well, coral is an extremely unique thing. It is actually two parts. It is both a plant and an animal. So the animal side of coral is a little thing called a coral polyp. So if you picture a tiny, tiny jellyfish about the size of a pinhead that sits upside down inside of a stony cup. So one individual coral structure can be made up of tens of thousands of individual polyps. However, those little polyps are pretty terrible at building up the coral. It only provides about 10% of the food for that piece of coral to grow. So it needs a bit of an assistance from a particular kind of algae called zooxanthellae. Now what that algae will do is it will come across and attach itself to that coral polyp tissue, and it can then photosynthesize sunlight into food and energy for the coral to grow. So it provides about 90% of the food for that piece of coral. And that algae, the zooxanthellae, is also the beautiful bright colours that we see in our coral as well. So if you've heard of coral bleaching, which I'm sure the majority of you probably have, it's basically when the water conditions start to go downhill, and unfortunately so does our coral. Coral is extremely temperamental. There's a whole bunch of factors out there that can have a detrimental impact on our coral reefs in today's world. Coral does not like warm temperatures above 30 degrees or so. It does also not like chemicals like oxybenzone that are in our sunscreen, and even chemicals from local farm runoff as well. So let's say the water gets too warm, above 30 degrees or so, that algae that lives inside the polyp, instead of providing food, will then provide a bit of a toxin. And that little animal will react in the only way it can possibly do, which basically kicks out the algae. Now when you've kicked out the algae, you've lost about 90% of the food for that piece of coral, and you've also then lost the beautiful bright colours that we see in our coral as well. And that is when you then get a bleached piece of coral. Now even if that piece of coral is bleached, there is actually about a 3-week turnaround where the conditions can start to come right again, and that algae can come back across and reattach itself to that coral polyp and it can continue to survive. However, unfortunately, 3 weeks is not a very long time. So as of roughly February, we have seen signs of bleaching along 30% of our Great Barrier Reef, and out of that 30%, half has now remained permanently bleached. And they do believe that potentially at this rate, with increasing temperatures and visitors and chemicals in the water, we will see signs of bleaching along the entire Great Barrier Reef within only the next 15 to 20 years, which is not a very long time considering it's been around for over 8,000 years and we haven't even been here for quite 300, so not a very long time from now, unfortunately. Now, as you can see in front of you in this tank, it is absolutely full of life. We have got 996 fish and 62 different species in this tank alone. Now, in this tank and out of the reef, animals and organisms who like to live with one another and form relationships so that they can live an easier or better life. So the largest, most prominent relationship on our Great Barrier Reef is coral itself, with that relationship with the algae and the animal living together. However, there's some relationships out there that are mutually beneficial. There's also some relationships where only one party will benefit and the other does not. And there are also some harmful relationships out in the reef as well. Now, a really good example of a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship that we have in this tank here is that of a little fish called the cleaner wrasse. So the cleaner wrasse is a small fish, it's only about 10 centimeters long, it has a pale front end, a blue back end, and a black stripe running down its body. Now what the little cleaner wrasse will do is they will essentially set up shop on prominent coral heads like the ones up to the top left, and that little fish will essentially do a bit of a dance. And that dance will attract large marine animals to pull up alongside these coral heads and get a bit of a cleaning service done. So what that little fish will do is it will go along that large marine animal's body, it will pick off any dead scales, any parasites, unwanted hitchhikers, and if the large marine animal is big enough, it will actually open up its mouth and let that cleaner wrasse voluntarily swim inside and act as a portable toothpick. So you're probably thinking it's got to be the bravest fish of the entire planet to be willingly swimming into the mouth of another marine animal. However, they will never eat the cleaner wrasse because if they do, they will never get clean at that cleaning station again. Now, both parties will benefit from this service greatly. The cleaner wrasse gets a really good source of protection while the large marine animal is hanging around, and it also doesn't have to go out looking for its food, since its food will come to the cleaning stations. That large marine animal will also benefit from this as it stays nice and clean, parasite-free, gets rid of any of those sort of stuck annoying bits of food that are in its teeth. So that's a really good example of a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. However, out on the reef, there are also some relationships where only one party will benefit and the other is not harmed. And a bit of a funny relationship we have on our reef is that of the pearlfish and the sea cucumber. Now, sea cucumbers have got it pretty good. They just go around the ocean floor, basically sucking in dirty sand and spitting it out clean. So, not too many animals out on the reef like to eat sea cucumbers. And the pearlfish over the years has learnt this. The pearlfish is a very long, skinny, elongated fish. It has no protruding pectoral fins or scales. And the pearlfish actually decides to live in the cloaca of the sea cucumber, so pretty much inside its bottom. Now, obviously, the sea cucumber does not benefit from this in any way whatsoever. Thankfully, it can't actually feel the pearlfish living inside it, since it doesn't actually have a brain to register that. However, the pearlfish will benefit from this relationship greatly, as it gets a great source of protection. If it ducks out and sees a predator, it just has to duck back in and doesn't even have to swim around the reef if it doesn't want to. So that's a good example of a symbiotic relationship where only one party will benefit. However, unfortunately, there are some relationships out there which might be parasitic and harmful to the other organism. And a good example of this would be the crown of thorn sea star and coral. Now, unfortunately, the favourite food for the crown of thorn sea star is coral itself. The crown-of-thorns sea star is a venomous species of sea star, and there is literally only about 2 or 3 animals that can successfully eat the crown-of-thorns. And we do have one of those 3 animals in this tank right in front of you, which is this big, beautiful fish right in the front center here. We have got Percy, who is our hump-headed Maori wrasse, or depending on where you're from, you might also know this fish as being the Napoleon wrasse. Now, Percy at the moment is relatively small for its size. Percy is what we call a protogenous hermaphrodite, which means that Percy will always start off its life as a female, and if given the right opportunity, later on in life can then change sex into a male. Now, if you've ever been snorkeling or diving off the coast of Cairns here, you quite possibly would have met a very large fish called Wally. Have any of you guys met Wally before? No, none of you guys today? Well, Wally is basically the dominant Maori wrasse, and that would be the male. So technically there's actually about 6 or 7 Wallies off the coast of Cairns, because each reef will have that one dominant male. Now that male can be upwards of 2.3 meters in length and weigh over 190 kilograms. Now if that dominant male were to pass away or disappear for a while, the next biggest female, if it's around 8 to 9 years of age, can then make the transition into becoming a male. So Percy, when we originally got Percy, Percy was a she, but because Percy is the only Maori wrasse in this tank, that makes Percy the dominant Maori wrasse. So Percy is now a he. You can sort of tell this because the hump on his forehead is getting relatively large, and those patterns are really starting to shine and show. Now we have started our feeding a little bit early. I was going to talk about this properly for you guys, but I do recommend, if you want to film it, do pull out your phones and cameras now, because these guys do not mess about when it comes to feeding time. What we've done is we've popped a PVC pipe into the water, and we've popped it halfway down there, and basically that's where all the water goes into the tank. So when we shoot out all the food, it's going to spread right across the entire tank. So we've got 62 different species in this tank, so we have to cater for their mouth sizes, dietary requirements, and how much they want to eat. So you've just seen a whole bunch of chopped up pieces of prawn, squid and fish. That's for all of our surgeon fish and the unicorn fish that you see. You're about to see a white misty cloud come out. Now that white misty cloud there, that's full of our microorganisms like sea monkeys and phytoplankton, and that's for all of our little antlers and the damselfish that you see in this tank as well. We've also shot down a whole bunch of food pellets, because we do have some herbivores in here too, and they need to eat those nutritional pellets. And then shortly, hopefully afterwards, we will see Percy being fed especially. Now Percy has been a bit cheeky and stolen a bit of extra food. Percy did eat quite a bit yesterday afternoon. We do feed this tank twice a day, so we put more than enough food to feed them during both feeds, so that way if they do miss out on a little bit in the morning, they'll get some in the afternoon. Now the reason why we have to feed Percy especially is because Percy is the largest fish in this tank. And if Percy goes hungry, Percy's got 995 things to choose from overnight. And obviously we don't want that happening. So really important that hopefully, right on cue, we've seen a little target go into the water. Now, we have trained Percy that that little black and white disc in the top right means food. And if Percy's hungry, he'll swim up to the top, we'll toss in a piece of squid, and if he's quick enough, he'll be able to grab the piece of squid before the other fish do. So hopefully we'll toss it in, yep, and he's just gonna look at it. Come on, Percy. No, don't do that. So if Percy is slow, unfortunately, as you can see, the other fish are not, and they will get it very quickly before Percy does. Hopefully, sometimes he's able to chase it back, but generally speaking, these fish are pretty quick and they don't mess about when Percy misses out on his food. Come on, Percy. We need to make sure that he has at least, hopefully, one piece of squid to keep it full. So we will try and toss in another piece. Hopefully he'll swim up to the surface so that way the fish don't steal it again. And is he going to get it? And he's just looking at it again. Nah, of course. So Percy can be a little bit fussy when it comes to feeding time. Now Percy, if Percy does get the piece of squid, Percy might actually regurgitate it. Come on. There we go. Alright, now, Percy does not have the best table manners. Percy will start to burp and sometimes even regurgitate its food. Now Percy's got what we call pharyngeal teeth, which basically means that Percy only has 4 teeth, and when you've only got 4 teeth, it's pretty hard to eat your food. So sometimes Percy might actually vomit it out and then suck it back in again, and it's just repositioning where it sits in his jaw to make it a little bit easier for him to eat that piece of squid. So he's at least had half a piece, which is good, so hopefully we'll toss in another piece. He's actually, the record, he's regurgitated out, I think, 4 times and burped 13 times is the record during one show. But because that piece was fairly small since the other fish got to it already, he hadn't really need to actually burp it out and reposition because it was already small enough. Now guys, if you are looking at visiting our beautiful Great Barrier Reef while you're here in Cairns, please, if you can guys, try and go out of your way to find a reef-safe sunscreen that does not have chemicals like oxybenzone in it. The Royal Lifesaving Australia offers a reef-safe sunscreen. It costs just the same as regular sunscreen, yet it doesn't have those harmful chemicals. They estimate 9,000 to 14,000 tonnes of sunscreen will actually seep out into our waterways from people visiting the Great Barrier Reef every single year. If you are visiting our reef, just remember guys, look and do not touch. You don't know what you're touching, you don't know if it's poisonous or venomous or anything like that. And if you do see a dead piece of coral or something that looks dead, try not to pick it up because it can still potentially have those little polyps living inside it, and it can still potentially come back to life as well. Now, right now you're continuing your journey, you're almost at the end. Your next stop will be the 11 AM Sharks and Rays presentation. So if you keep heading along the top level, go down the escalator, they'll do that, and at 11:15 they will jump into the tank and hand feed the stingrays and the leopard sharks. Guys, thank you all so much for coming along, and if you do have any questions whatsoever, do pop up your hand and I'll come over and have a chat. Otherwise, have a fantastic day. Thank you guys.